Hi everyone, welcome to my video about restoring the Majestic wire recorder. Now, we did a video about 9 years ago featuring the Webster Chicago wire recorder. And eventually these machines stopped working for me, so I went ahead and got rid of them. But then got an inquiry from someone, a YouTube subscriber, and asked me if I would dub off a reel for him. So this happened. I went into an antique mall and there was this beautiful Majestic wire recorder waiting to be restored. And I went in all effort to try and restore it. So here we'll kind of start here and do a little tour of it. And then we'll actually go to video and I'll show you what I ended up with. So just to give you a heads up, I tried to restore it and I'll show you what I did. But it didn't restore it, and I had already put way too much money into it, so I bailed and decided to turn this into a modern player. So we'll see that as well. All right, so moving on here. So this is what the box looks like. You can see the speaker grill is very deteriorated there. And of course, the cabinet is not in the best of shape either. But we're going to remedy this by replacing the front grill with some cloth that I found at a craft store. So here's the inside here, just a tour. So you start from the left there. There's that neon light that's for your recording level. And then we have a turntable that plays only 78 RPM records and plays wire recordings. And again, you can do some research on your own to learn what wire recording is all about. It was a precursor to magnetic tape, which put this into the obsolete box. On the right there was our controls. This is where I've already removed the chassis from the machine. So you had your controls there, and then you had a little window for your tuner, for your AM radio tuner. Some instructions on how to use the unit are placed inside. And then there's that neon light, which I ended up putting into my Frankenstein unit. You'll see that and how that works shortly. Again, here's all the controls. You had an on-off tone control up at the top, volume, your radio recorder selector, and you had a station selector there. For this particular selector, you could say play wire, play the phono, play a microphone, or play the radio. Now, in either phono, mic, or radio, you could record to the wire. So those were your three recording sources. But you could kind of use the box as a PA system if you wanted to. Here's a close-up of that turntable. You can see a lot of dirt and dust in there. There were bugs all over the inside of this thing. That was a joy to vacuum out. A lot of dead, fossilized spiders in this thing. Another view from the side, and on the left there, in that little hole, there was a microphone, which turned out to be completely dead. I put a modern plug on it and plugged it into a modern amplifier and nothing came out. So that I believe is a ceramic microphone and it completely was useless. So here's the chassis that I removed and the tubes there and a connector cable there on the far right. Here's another view with that connecting cable removed. So this is when it was on the workbench. And you can see the different tubes there. I believe there were only, let's see, 2, 4, 5. There were 7 tubes total. Here's the underside of the chassis, and you can see all those ancient paper capacitors. So all of those little firecracker-looking units had to be replaced, and I did so. Here's a close-up of some of those little firecrackers. Now, they are potentially firecrackers, at least in their modern form, because they tend to dry out. They're made out of paper with a wax coating on the outside. And when they dry out and you don't replace them and you plug them into your mains, they tend to catch fire or explode. Yeah, it's really nice, really fun. Here's a couple more. You can see the values are written right on the capacitor there. You can see this is a 0.05 microfarad at 200 volts. So in a lot of cases, when you're restoring something old like this, like an old radio perhaps, all of the information that you need is inside the player, at least in the case of the capacitors. So this was another module that was down in the machine, and look at the nasties there on the right tube. And what's in the middle there, that big paper thing, is also a capacitor, but it is a electrolytic capacitor. So I did end up ordering all new tubes for this unit, and as we'll discuss, it did not fix the unit. This is the underside of that external module. I really don't know the actual purpose of this. I did get the schematic for it, but I know there's some power regulation going on in this particular setup, and the unit does not have a power transformer, which I thought was a little interesting and different. And speaking of blown capacitors, this one actually did explode, not for me, but for someone else who apparently attempted to plug it in. And that was the values on that particular one. And there's another close-up of a capacitor. We already saw that one. So I did order the Sam's PhotoFact material for it, and apparently there were two different models of this unit. The 7YR753 and the 7YR772. One is a console that's floor model. The other one is a tabletop model, which is mine. Mine is the tabletop model. So again, here's all those capacitors close up. And in the next photo, you'll see what it looks like when they've been replaced with modern equivalents. So there's non-electrolytic capacitors and electrolytic. And so the electrolytic ones there are now blue and black. You can see those in the center left of your screen, and all those little yellow ones replaced the non-electrolytics. So now we get into the turntable section here. So this required a lot of love. You can see there on the top left is, see if my pointer works here. Yeah, it does. So this part here is like a worm gear, and it is attached to this gear, which is attached to this item here, and this moves the audio head up and down, which helps to wind the wire onto the take-up or supply spindles in a orderly fashion so it doesn't get tangled. And what I've found and noticed about this unit, it is not especially graceful at winding. Sometimes things are a little off, and I do experience some entanglement. This is a two-motor system. It does not use rollers to switch from play to rewind. And that motor there on the right, the black one, is the rewind motor. The take-up motor has been removed in this picture to show you that little pulley there in the middle that transfers the movement from the motor to the turntable. And then you got your selector switch there on the far right bottom. Here's that roller close-up. Now I attempted to retread this particular roller with a piece of has a belt, actually, glued a belt onto it. It did not work very well, but I did find another roller, a new tire to put on it from a previous record player or something that I had worked on. So that helped a lot and helped with wow and flutter, which was really, really bad with this setup you see here. There's a close-up of that gear establishment, and there's a close-up of the spindle part that moves the head up and down, bobs the head up and down. Very similar to like the way an old school rod and reel would work. Fishing pole. And if you looked at the very bottom of your screen there, next to that brown piece, you'll see a dead spider there. Very beautiful. This is the underside of the audio head, and I actually had to wire it differently than it is wired here for the previous unit. And strangely enough, those particular elements there, those connectors, did not work for me. This is what the speaker grill removed. You can see here, I've removed it, and you can see the hole for where the speaker comes through. And here is the new speaker grill, again with a piece of cloth that I had purchased, a tweed cloth actually, from a local hobby shop. So here's your before and after. So a little bit nicer look than before. I wish I hadn't touched the top edge here with my finger with some glue on it, and it left a little blemish there. But that's not my forte, is doing cloth reupholstery. So there's the unit with everything out of it and with the new cloth. Here is the speaker that was busted. You can see the crack there in the middle. and I replaced it with a modern speaker. I'll show you that here in a moment. All right, and speaking of in a moment, let's look at the reinvention of this machine. So we are going to reinvent the unit because replacing all the tubes with their new old stock equivalents and all the caps did not get the unit working again, and I had already put too much money into it. So I said, you know what, let's abort. Let's work towards making this work with a modern amplifier. So speaking of modern amps, this is the one I chose. Again, trying to keep the cost low on this. So this is a Pyle PFA 200 amp with the specs there on the right. The speakers, cheapest ones I could find. These are 5x7 coaxial speakers, 250 watt, 4 ohm speakers. Of course, I get 2 and I'm only using 1, but nothing like having a spare, right? For the preamp, which I'm going to need to amplify the weak audio head signal, I used a micro cassette recorder and wired the head of the wire recorder, the bobbing head, into this micro cassette recorder to preamplify for me. And I bought a power adapter to power it. It needed a 3-volt power adapter. How about a digital recorder to capture the audio in a very modern way? So let's make digital out of the analog audio. So I did the VN541PC Pi Olympus. I'll put links to all of these things down in the description in case you want to start a project of this type. I decided to get fancy, and we're going to put some lights in there to light things up. I was a little surprised at the way the lights turned out, but they're kind of cool. I think you'll like them. To cover where the volume controls and tone and etc. were, I bought these little switches and who absolutely fit perfectly into those spots. You'll see those momentarily. Then I needed some grommets, so I just bought a whole kit of them. So there was a hole there where the tone arm went. I decided not to keep the tone arm. I don't need a record player, so I just completely removed the tone arm. I was going to do that with the restoration of the original guts, but decided to abort with this modern setup. So needed some grommets, not only to cover that hole where the tone arm was, but the 2 rubber mounts that are on the turntable base were also rotten, and so a couple of grommets fixed that as well. I decided instead of splitting the signal that comes out of the micro cassette recorder, I decided I would just use this line level output from one of the speaker terminals on the amplifier, and it has worked rather well. Did not have to buy one of these. I already had one, but I'm showing it here for reference. This was not the exact one I used, but very similar. And then I said, you know what, it's kind of dark underneath that hood, underneath that lid, so let's put a light there. So I have a light that I got from 5 and Below, and you'll see that shortly. So now let's look at the cost of all this stuff. So the original restoration required purchasing all these beautiful items. Non-electrolytic caps were about $15. Then we had electrolytic caps, new old stock tubes, a potentiometer to replace the almost frozen volume control, stylus cartridge, which I didn't end up using but bought anyway. A modern ceramic with a 78 RPM stylus on it was just $10. A Sam's PhotoFact printout was $7.75. It actually was an original printout. It wasn't just the digital one printed out. It's got the old brown look to it. And then I got impatient, so I ordered the digital version. I paid $45 for the unit itself at a local antique mall, as you saw that picture of in the beginning. And then the cost to reinvent it was, so here's all the little goodies: the lid light, the amp, the speaker, the micro cassette recorder. I already had it, didn't have to buy one. The LED strip lights, the AC power strip to plug everything into, the grommet collection or kit, the power supply for the micro cassette recorder, the digital recorder, switches that we discussed covering all the holes, the line out converter, which I already had, a guitar socket, which I was going to put an external jack for a microphone on the outside, and I did. It just doesn't do anything at the moment. I'll show it to you when we go to video. And then the cabling, of course, I already had the 3.5 millimeter to RCA cable, so I didn't have to buy that. My total expenditure for this half of it would have been just $148. So if I had gone that route and not this one, it actually would have been cheaper, even with all the fancies added in, than actually doing a complete restore of the unit. So far, I've spent $381.30 on this. And when I came to that total, I was like, oh crap, I spent a lot of money on this. All right, so going forward, let's present to you. Let's go to video, and I'm going to show you this unit and see what we ended up with and kind of retour the underside and upper side. So let's go there now. And here we are, sort of in the dark with the Frankenstein Majestic player. And here's what happens when I turn on the cool lights. All right, let's take a look at the results of all of this hard work. We'll start inside the hood here, and we'll start at the left side here. So you can see I've labeled this record out, and that is because this cable here is going to connect to our digital recorder into its microphone input. Just below that is the neon light that was originally used for checking record levels. It now will tell me whenever my motors are actuated. So there's play and there's rewind, and you can see it lights up for both. There are really only two functions of it, and that is play and rewind. We might explore recording, attempts to record in a future video, perhaps. But today we're just going to look at playback because that was the whole goal. This is one of the spools that came with it. It's got some kind of World War II history radio program on it, just a segment of it. It actually spreads across several of these spools. But so you can see our controls are here, and we have our spool here with its spindle that it's on. And then our head is here. There is a reset button, which we don't need to use in this case. And then we've got our turntable, which also doubles as a take-up spindle, a non-removable take-up spindle. And again, I'll demonstrate all of this working here shortly. But just to see the functions, here is play. And once I put it in play, our little audio head begins to bob up and down as if it is threading the wire onto the spool. And then again, here's our rewind. Okay. So operation is simple. You simply wire the wire across this reel here. And then you're going to go over to the right side where I have labeled this preamp. So this is the power that powers the microcassette recorder on the underside of the unit. So if I hit that, it will turn that preamp on. If I go over here to my pile section, I can turn that on, and that is our regular amplifier. I've got a MP3 input here by 3.5 millimeter if I need it. I've got a treble and a bass control and a large volume control illuminated with a beautiful blue ring. I've labeled that amp, labeled that power, and the rest of these switches don't actually do anything. So they are there for future proofing it, so to speak, if we decide to add on to it later. So now let's take a look at what's going on underneath. Welcome to the underside of the unit where all the cool things happen. This is what I put together here. You can see the amplifier there at the top, the microcassette recorder preamp, the two motors, the gear assembly, the modern speaker there on the left, a power strip where all of our goodies plug in are there. I mentioned that I put a jack on there for a microphone. There's that jack, which is not doing anything, but it turned out kind of pretty. So how does it work? Well, we take input from the audio head on the underside here. As you can see, the top two left terminals ended up being what I needed. That wire goes from there into the microcassette recorder to its circuit board, where the audio head connects on the inside of this unit. And then I hit play, and then I connect power to it. And then from the unit itself, the audio output there, the headphone jack, it goes from there into the input on my amplifier, From the amplifier is a speaker output there, the right channel. That goes down to our modern speaker, as we mentioned in the slides. And then also goes to the attenuator that's right there and is two-sided taped to the top of the unit. That goes up to the top of the unit and allows us to record to our modern digital recorder. You can see I use brackets to mount the unit where I needed it on the inside. I got those at Lowe's and actually didn't include those in the pricing. I didn't include the price of the cloth on the pricing either, but you'll forgive me, right? So then from there, we're going to go down here and look at the two motors. So we've got our rewind motor here and our take-up motor here. And there's a solenoid on top that is activated along with the rewind motor to pull the pulley or tire away from this motor as it is attached to the turntable. And then we've got our gearing system there with our audio head. And then we've got our lighting system, which I installed on the inside, going around there. And the remote sensor sits in this window right here, this hole, and allows me to control the lights from the underside. This is our neon lamp that we saw demonstrated briefly. The switch that turns on and off the preamp is back there in the back right there. And now the moment you've all been waiting for. Was all of this worth the money that I've spent on it? Well, I would have to say yes, it has worked well, and I do have a nice working player here, which you are about to hear. And I will give you a little backstory. So a gentleman named David B, as in boy, sent me this spool that he would like to transfer over to digital, which I already have for him. And he has given me permission to play some of this for you. So I'm going to play some of his reel because that World War II one may have some copyright stuff on it, and I don't want to get in trouble. Yes, old stuff can still be copyrighted. So here's how we're going to do this. So we're going to take this spool and we're going to put it on the supply spindle back here in the back. And then what we're going to do is wire it over, or thread it across the audio head, which is here. Now, originally, these came with these strips. These are leader strips, and these strips would kind of sink their teeth in, so to speak, into these reels here, but they're old and wrinkled, and I don't really want to use these. So what I do is I take a piece of adhesive tape, in this case, Gorilla Tape, and I'm going to use that to hold it onto the reel. So what I'll do is I'll take the end of it and put the tape on it like this. I saw one come in with a piece of string on it, and I don't necessarily recommend that either, but apparently it worked at one time. So put the piece of tape and just kind of stick it here on top, and then guide the wire down onto the spool, and we should be ready to go. So I'm going to turn my preamp on here, which is the micro cassette recorder doing the preamplification. I'm going to turn on the main amplifier here. And it is rather cranked up here, so let's turn it down a little bit. And then I'm going to switch this into the play mode, and let's take a listen. So it starts out a little quiet. In some cases, people made these recordings when the machine was deteriorating. That may be what happened here at the beginning of this reel, because suddenly it'll get loud.
Tootsie, how are you doing?
Well, I, at the moment, am holding Marguerite's drink, and no one's dancing with me, and I'm having a miserable time.
That's a hell of a note.
What can I do?
Do you have time?
I have to. Do I have time?
That's all we need.
I have plenty of it.
Listen, why don't you scare up a little talent here now? We'll put this thing on for an hour's program. It'll be a hell of a lot of fun listening to it when it's over.
For an hour on that?
Yeah.
All right, can you hold it off now?
No, it'll keep on going. Just straighten them up. See that light flicker?
Yeah.
Say yes.
Yes.
See it? Now watch it. Say yes.
Yes.
See?
Oh, it's that sensitive.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not going to say yes. Not to you, sir. Now, you want to know it?
Hail, hail, the gang's all here.
We must
Rita and Frank.
party word now.
How are the figures, Frank? All the figures are good. Hey, Bill, how's everything up in Wellesley? How's everything in Wellesley?
Fine, fine. I was just talking about her ashes being shaken.
Who's Ashes?
This young lady here.
You mean Eleanor?
Yeah. Oh, Eleanor gets her ashes shaken at least twice.
What did you say?
What?
What'd you say about Eleanor's ass?
I said Eleanor gets her ashes shaken a couple of times.
Oh.
Did you hear the one about the nudist colony?
No.
Well, there was a young lady that joined the nudist colony, and she was very nice looking, and of course all the boys were looking her over. So she came in, they gave her the once over, and one fellow says to the other, "Say, I'll bet she'd look nice in a sweater suit."
Oh. What?
One interesting item to note is that there is tension on both of these spindles. I don't know if you've ever worked on a VCR, but VCRs have like a little foam pad that goes around the take-up and supply spindles to put tension on the tape so that it will pack tightly onto the take-up and the rewind. The same thing existed here. So if I remove this particular set screw here and I lift up this, underneath is a little spring, this guy here, that's underneath there. And then there's also a foam pad that's lubricated, and the base that it's on does not move. So what it does is it adds some friction to this supply spindle so that the wire coming off of it, wound onto the take-up spindle, is done so, again, with some tension and packed on there tightly. If this is not set correctly, when you go to rewind, it will make a huge tangled mess. I have already discovered that on my own, and I am sparing you the drama of showing that to you. There is a tension spring on the underside of this turntable. You may have saw it as we were looking underneath earlier, and I don't know of a way to adjust it other than making the spring a little tighter perhaps. But again, it's important on both ends, supply and take up, that there is tension on these. That way everything reels on, packs on as it is supposed to. And this will conclude this video about the Majestic wire recorder, and in my case, wire player. I hope you enjoyed it. Hope you enjoyed the journey along with me. If you have any questions or you want to get into a project like this, just leave me a comment below or get in touch with me through my Facebook page. All those social media links are in the description. Again, all of the parts needed for this project are also in the description. You can check those out. Those are affiliate links. I do appreciate your support on those. And again, subscribe, like the video, leave a comment, and we will see you next time. Thanks for watching.
Bill, what did you say?